Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by Caliber Mind. This is the podcast for B2B marketers looking to up-level their skills to succeed in leadership. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I am joined by Dan Frawley. Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Camela. Yeah, thank you. The short story, I had a kind of a triple career. I was in the Navy in the first third, did the Top Gun thing before Tom Cruise did, and then I transitioned into business school up to Boston. I was a CEO for founders. I was not a founder type. I was kind of a scaler. And so I had the right skills for the scaler, and I just got the chance to work with these tremendous entrepreneurs and companies. And I'm sure in our conversation, I'll use a lot of examples because it was 25 years of just wild and across three companies, and managed to have all kinds of fun, work with some really great people, talented people, a lot of good sales and marketing people. And then I ended up, after CEB/Gartner bought my company, I started a venture company within Corporate Executive Board. And then Corporate Executive Board was acquired by the company that acquired my first company, which was Gartner. And so we had to spin it out. And long story short, that gave me a chance to start name Falmouth Ventures, which was the internally started venture group within CEB. And that's what I currently do, myself and one other individual.
Dan, welcome back. I'm excited to dig into today's topic. What skills is your marketing team missing today? And I think I want to clarify first that we may not be talking about full-time marketers, we might be talking about fractional marketers, but just would love your insight at different stages, what skill sets you see missing.
One of the biggest problems I see, Camela, is that sometimes, particularly in early stage companies, there's a mismatch between what they need and what they hire. In fairness to the marketer, okay, and to the company, right? Sometimes they may overshoot. Most of the times they undershoot, where the CEO is left really in the chief marketing role, okay, and then he's hiring maybe people that are less experienced, more junior, and they're in execution role. And it's difficult. Let's be really clear. It's difficult. As you're doing this, trying to hire into that is very tricky. I'd rather have overshoot it and be clear with the person hiring that they could help lift us to that growth that they're used to, maybe a bigger size company. It's just a very tricky balancing act. I find very few companies often get that right. I find use of consultants or independent contractors sometimes can be very valuable that way because they're very clear. The expectations are just much clearer, okay, than bringing somebody into a fuzzy situation where you're like, well, you just brought somebody with 2 years of marketing experience. You want them to be your CMO. You didn't say that, but that's really what you want. And I talked to the founder CEO, like, that's not going to work. Someone's going to be disappointed, and probably will be both of you, right, ultimately. So I think getting the right fit at the right stage. Obviously, the number of tools is increasing. Again, I don't want to overdo the AI thing we'll talk about is very powerful, has lots of possibilities. But I also see lots of tools. We've invested in a number of them. One that I mentioned earlier, it sold earlier, and it just did nothing but improve the demonstration. One of the things that Gartner said, and CEB mentioned it later, I think, was that technology is getting increasingly complicated to the point where the sales and marketing teams don't understand or don't fully understand it, and therefore can't clearly communicate it to the buyers, a la marketing, right? Yeah. That defines a marketing problem right there, right? When in fact, one of the smartest guys I know, said, when you're selling, I want you to, this talking to the salespeople and to the marketers, say, I want you to market and sell as if the people receiving your communication, verbally or otherwise, have their CEO on their shoulder, okay? Their CEO on their shoulder. And that forces you to have to articulate what another smart guy said to me. Listen, when you sell to a company, the only three things the CEO of the company cares about is growing sales, reducing expenses, or efficiency. Okay, that's the language of a CEO. So if you're going to sell into them, then you need to speak that language in a way that is translated appropriately for the person that you're marketing to. Okay, but remember, never forget that the CEO of that company you're selling to is sitting right on the shoulder or at the table with the person you're selling to. And I thought that was a wonderful tool to help me understand about how to think about marketing in the present age, right? Probably always, but certainly in the present age is AI with the ability to protect massive amounts of data. And we all know it's not there, Camela. You go to your typical large company, whether it's electric or phone or whatever, and you say, you got a problem. And everybody's trained to get the word agent really quick because the AI never works.
Yes.
I don't understand. Say again, please. Could you phrase that differently? You spend 3 minutes, 5 minutes, you're like, agent. Okay, that tells you the state of AI, right?
How many different ways can I say human being?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Agent. Oh gosh.
I suspect that's a good segue into what you do or don't see in the boardroom with early stage companies with marketers. And you mentioned the three things the CEO and board care about, but wondering your perspective there.
13% of buyers agree the seller is relevant. Let's start with that one. Okay. 13% is relevant. 25% of sellers understand my role as the buyer. This is the buyer's language. Okay. There's some really awesome books been written. I had the good fortune to be at CB with a guy named Matt Dixon and Ted McKenna, two really smart guys in the area of B2B sales and marketing. And they wrote a couple of books. You probably know of them, Camela. You know, one was The Effortless Experience, The Challenger Sale, The Jolt Effect is I think the most recent one they wrote. Matt and Ted, great folks, really smart guys, very committed. Matt ran the sales and marketing practice at CEB, so they had talked to thousands of B2B customers all the time about this stuff. It was fascinating. But it's a pretty sad state, specifically in terms of the buyer's perception of the seller. A 1% open rate on emails, I mean, that's gross. And by the way, along with that, let's add in 30% of the purchasing teams are growing. So the size of the team you're talking to is growing. And one thing I always love to hear from a marketer that walks in my door is he doesn't talk about the buyer in a one-dimensional uniperson. It's not. Okay, it's a multiple of people. And one of the companies, without naming it, that we invested in it fascinated me on this topic. And they, by the way, they just had a phenomenal exit after just killing it for 5 years. They went after that problem. And I see a bunch of companies attacking that problem about the buyer. It's just too complicated for the buyer to understand. And then when you add to that, well, you got the finance part of the buyer, you got the marketing part of the buyer, you got this part, you got 7 different people in the buying process, on all different levels. And you're trying to communicate to each of them based on, well, this guy only cares about how much you're going to cost, right? And the other person cares about, tell me what it's going to do for me, how it's going to make my job easier. Okay. And I think they said in the Jolt effect really, really clearly, it isn't about succeeding that most buyers are worried about. They're most concerned about not failing. Yeah. Okay, just don't fail if I buy this from you, right? So I think having a very good, I think the perspective that I'm talking about is well-read, knowledgeable about the macro helps you with the micro marketing. Okay. And there's some wonderful works out there and things that have been written and podcasts like your own that are helping people trying to understand that marketing is changing. And marketing and sales is changing. In many ways, the basic process is not, but the tools and techniques and methods are. And that's the part you have to be on top of. And when I interview, and I know when board members interview, they want to make sure these marketers that are interviewing or coming to the table are on top of this, both from a macro, micro, as well as some of the processes and tools that are changing.
Your stats are spot on. I think our buyers are up to 14 people on the buyer committee now. Forrester last came out with. That makes sense to me. It's so interesting to me, as you know as well as I do, that marketing is typically invested in later on. A lot of priority is put on sales. But as you mentioned, that 1% open rate is tied to cold prospecting around email, and I've even seen it lower than that. I guess my question here is, do you think who is getting involved with the buyer at which point is changing? So is marketing involved for a pretty good pace before sales even talks to anybody? We've seen data that supports that.
I think that's a really good question. And I think that's a really important point, which is what I see is it's changing. Okay. This is where I told you my millennial son works in the business for me, right? And he has friends that have started businesses and things. It's shifting. When I was a young CEO starting up, I didn't hire a marketer until there were we were 20 people into the company. I hired salespeople and I did everything I could. And there's a whole conversation podcast on de-risking sales hiring, but I did everything I could as I learned to de-risk those people that I brought in. Okay. I learned there were different people that were good at early stage company product selling versus later stage. There was a whole, like any profession, there's a lot of elements to it. But what's shifting is I see a day now where I don't think you'll need salespeople. I think that's a long way off, but I see the growth and the strength and the role, the rise of the marketer.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of exactly some of the techniques and the promise of those techniques that are happening. So what that means for me is I see companies hiring marketers sooner in the process, often they're hiring right out of the gate. I often used to rely on the salespeople. They did marketing as well as selling. I have a number in my head. They typically did 25 to 35% of their time prospecting.
Yeah.
Okay. And at least, right? And there are some salespeople that are excellent marketers.
Yeah.
You may not call them that. And by that, I mean, they have tremendous customer and product understanding. They speak, remember I said they speak to the buyer and the buyer says, this person gets me. Okay. Buyers, they want to buy from people they trust and they like. Okay. And the best salespeople had that ability to earn that trust. And that, earning that trust didn't come from cranking up 5 million email campaigns, entering stuff into salesforce.com all day. Okay. They worked at understanding the buyer. Let's call it the buying unit, as you and I just agreed. It's no longer one person. Okay. The buying unit, all the various roles, concerns, okay, problems, challenges, competitive dynamics. Okay. And so that they understood that buyer really, really, really well. Okay. Not unlike, frankly, dating to getting married. Okay. Right. You understand that person. Does that person believe you? Do they trust you? Do you show that? Do you work at it? Right. So that hasn't changed. But I do see this shift from marketing starting to rise in B2B SaaS that I used to be very sales centric.
Yes.
And now I see it shifting.
Yes. And I think it's going to require a change in behavior and skill sets on the marketing side as well as the way buyers want. So what I'm hearing from you is some good advice to marketers would be prioritize spending time with your buyer. Mm-hmm. You can't be in a silo anymore. You can't just crank out emails and not understand the buyer committee. Mm-hmm. You need to get more familiar with that any way you can.
Absolutely. And I think the buyers are going to be, the marketers are going to be challenged to begin to continue to develop the left side of their brain, as well as many of them historically have had such a tremendous right side of the brain, right? The creativity and the passion and the E quotient. Okay. But now the amount of data and the amount of quantitative tools available, it's going to challenge both sides of the marketer's brain.
Yeah. And I think there are people out there who are happy to do both. And I think there are some who have been told they're creative and not good at math for too long and need to start challenging themselves in that perception. I think repetition is the key to success there. Mm-hmm. Dan, thank you so much. Great segue to tomorrow's topic, which is why longevity isn't a thing in B2B go-to-market management. Where can people find you to network?
I'm on LinkedIn and active on it, so no problem there.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out caliberbuying.com.